All right, good evening. Welcome everyone to the January 12th, 2026 Council Committee meeting. I'm Council President Laurel Birchfield, Ward 4, and I'll be chairing this meeting. I'll now do a roll call at this time. Councilmember Reynolds.
Present.
Councilmember Wooded.
Present.
Councilmember Person.
Present.
Councilmember Murphy.
Present.
Councilmember Knappen.
Present.
Councilmember Rainey.
Present.
Councilmember Aldridge.
Present.
Next, I'd like to explain our procedures for public input. In an effort to enhance citizens' ability to present information to the governing body, anyone interested in addressing the governing body is strongly encouraged to register to speak by noon on the day of the meeting, but that is not required. Information has been posted online about how to sign up. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no person may speak more than once on any one agenda item. Only comments related to city business are permitted. Disruptive acts are not permitted as per our policy statement number 7 and will not be tolerated. After you're finished speaking, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. Additionally, comments can be submitted to the entire governing body via email at governingbody@cityofshawnee.org. There is one item on tonight's agenda. Item number 1 is a staff update from Public Works. City Manager Paul Kramer will kick off the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Birchfield. To kick off our first council committee of 2026, I've asked Kevin Manning, our Director of Public Works, to give an overview of the upcoming transportation grant funding sources and kind of walk through that in anticipation of coming back for further direction coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Manning, our Public Works Director.
All right, good evening once again. So I'm going to be going over tonight several different potential funding pots for the city. So here's kind of the agenda for this presentation. I'm going to kind of go over what I'm really trying to accomplish and what I want you to kind of get out of this presentation tonight. I'll go over a funding overview and talk about each individual funding pot, talk about some previous projects to kind of give you an idea of what we've been successful on in the past to get some of these funds, talk about some potential projects that we may have applied for in the past or maybe looking at, and then talk about the application schedule and next steps so you're familiar with what's going on there. So once for tonight, I want you to start getting a better understanding of what type of projects can be funded by each one of these pots. There's 4 different ones I'm going to talk about here. And then once again, starting to think about potential projects for applications. I'll say we're not necessarily looking for you for all new ideas. Like city staff has some ideas here, but this is a good opportunity if the governing body has some thoughts or ideas of potential projects. This is the opportunity to share those basically when we come back to you in February for some further discussion and direction on kind of what we want to apply for on these projects. And the good news, I'll get into this a little bit too, is we're not really limited to necessarily one application. And so we're not trying to narrow things down just to one. We're looking at some different options and we can have multiple applications if we want. It is relatively time intensive to do these applications. So we just don't want to, I would say, just shotgun and just do everything. We want to be focused, but we're not limited to, just one. We can have multiple applications if needed. So really what we're talking about is federal funds coming through transportation that are basically allocated through the Mid-America Regional Council every 2 years. There's 4 main pots of funding. I got a lot of acronyms for you tonight, and I'll go into these a little bit more in detail, but you've got STBG, TA, CMAQ, and CRP. STBG, or Surface Transportation Block Grant, that's typically used for more large-scale roadway projects. TA is Transportation Alternative. A lot of times it's used for maybe trails or something similar to that, so not really much roadway, but more alternative forms of transportation. And then CMAQ and CRP, CMAQ is congestion mitigation and air quality, and then CRP is carbon reduction program. Those are used for basically different types of programs or projects that will basically help reduce either congestion or lower the amount of carbon that's being released. So one thing to keep in mind is when we apply for these, this is a competitive process. We've talked about different county funding pots like CARS and SMAC. Those are competitive as well, but not as much so. These are much more competitive. We're competing against all other municipalities on the Kansas side of the metro area, and then other entities that may be eligible for this funding. So funding is not a guarantee by any means, just because we apply, and usually around 30 to 50% of projects are funded. So just keep that in mind. That being said, our goal as a staff isn't just to apply for these, but we want to apply for the projects that are most likely to get funded. So in the past, we're looking to optimize our scoring. So we may tailor these projects, and maybe you put certain things in or take things out that maybe we wouldn't do if it was purely funded through the city, but we're trying to maximize our scoring in order to receive these funds. The maximum award is 80% of construction costs. This doesn't include engineering, like right-of-way, utility acquisition, but it's an 80-20 split for construction. So it's really great for the city if we can get that. It's not a guarantee we will get 80%. We can always apply for less and have the city fund a larger portion. Sometimes that's helpful in our application as well. But at a minimum, we have to fund 20% of construction and then engineering and right-of-way costs. And this is a reimbursement program, meaning that we have to fund everything up front and then we are reimbursed after the fact. So I just wanted to provide an example of what this may look like. So you can see here, the first pie chart on the left here, we've got a project with a $6 million budget, $5 million for construction and $1 million for design and right-of-way and utilities. And then you can kind of see the cost breakdown a little bit on the right side. So in this particular scenario, maybe we receive $4 million in federal funding that would go towards construction. We have to pay 1%. That's our 20% match of the project. And then we also pay the slice in orange for design, right-of-way, and utilities. So in this particular example, we would basically be spending about 33% of the project cost, and the federal government's picking up the remaining 66% of the total projects. So going on into the first funding pot, that's Surface Transportation Block Grant. Once again, this is really intended for kind of larger type projects, more roadway focused. And these are kind of some of the categories that are eligible for this. We have roadway capacity, transportation safety and structure, operations and management, bridge replacement, active transportation. So this is actually very broad. If we wanted to do like a trail project, we could theoretically apply for it as part of this, but through like active transportation, but this kind of has a broader range of potential application types. And so like if we did have a trail project, we'd be more likely to put that into a different funding pot. But we have a lot of flexibility here. There were $30 million in available funds that were available in the last funding cycle, and that was in 2024. So another thing to keep in mind is this is kind of a lengthy process, as you can kind of see from this last bullet. So in 2024, we were actually applying for 27, 28 funds. So I'm sure you can figure out that. That means in this application cycle, we'll be applying for 29, 30 funds. So we're going through this process now, but even if we are awarded a project, the actual project won't start, construction would not start theoretically until at the earliest of 2029. I'm moving on to transportation alternative set aside. Once again, this is kind of a carve out, and it's for basically these items here: on-road and off-road trails, safe routes for non-drivers, and the safe routes to school program. So there's $4.5 million in available funding in the last cycle. And we'll probably see a number maybe in that ballpark for this coming cycle as well. This is, like I said, more maybe pedestrian or even bicycle focused, and it's separate from STBG. And then finally, we have congestion mitigation and air quality and the carbon reduction program. So we haven't received official guidance on what these programs are going to look like yet. We've already received kind of updates in terms of the scoring for STBG and TA, so we have a pretty good idea. We're still digging into it, but we have an idea of what that application may look like. The federal government hasn't released the guidance on these, so we could see some significant changes. That's yet to be determined, but we'll obviously be keeping an eye on that over the next coming months. In the past, items that were eligible for these programs were alternative fuel vehicles, bike pedestrian as a form of transportation, traffic flow improvement, and removing vehicle trips through transit. So what I would describe this program as, it's a lot more, I guess, data focused. In order to receive funding, you have to show, like, for instance, on carbon reduction, if you're going to go out and build a trail, how are you reducing the amount of like vehicle trips from a motor vehicle? Where like the TA funding I described earlier is more like recreational trails. I mean, it would be harder to build a recreational trail like using this program because the mentality is, well, people aren't using this to commute. They're using it more for recreation. So that's kind of the differentiating factor there. And you can see the funding amounts here. Once again, $5.6 million in 2024 for CMAQ and $4 million for carbon reduction. And once again, these are just example numbers. We haven't seen any additional guidance as to what these numbers may look like. So could be less, could be similar, could even be more, but we'll wait and see on those. So just to give you, I wanted to give you some examples of what we've done in the past. So the first one that was funded partially through STBG was Monticello Road. It's just south of Shawnee Mission Parkway. So this was a kind of a smaller country road previously and was built to more of a major arterial section that you can see on this lower picture here, where it's a 3-lane section basically from south of Shawnee Mission Parkway close down to the city limits. We have bike lanes on there now. We've actually got a striped buffer area for those bike lanes. And we also have a trail on the west side of the roadway and a sidewalk on the east side. So this was a major improvement project for the city that was completed back in 2021 and 2022. And that was partially funded through STBG funds. Another one that we've talked about several times recently is Midland Drive. So this was, let's see here. We applied for this all the way back in probably 21 or 22. I suppose it was 2022, and we're just now getting it built next year. So once again, some planning has to go into this, but this is going to be a great project for us as well. But once again, this was funded through STBG. In terms of TA projects, so back in 2022, we applied for some funding to basically upgrade ADA facilities at a lot of signalized intersections across the city. We weren't able to, you see this in the picture on the left side of your screen here, we weren't able to upgrade those facilities at all those locations, but basically this brought curb ramps up to modern standards to meet ADA. It also allowed us to add new push buttons that were ADA compliant as well. So that's the type of project that was eligible. And then we also have a project coming up for construction in 2027 as a Turkey Creek Trail extension where we're still kind of looking at design on this. We're going to be in design this year, but it's basically going to be upgrading that route basically from about Neiman Road over to Turkey Creek Trail. And this is a project we're partnering with Merriam on. And once again, we were able to fund it, or we're going to be able to fund it primarily through TA funds. And I just wanted to make note. So we haven't had a lot of projects that have really fallen into the CMAQ or CRP funding pot. So we actually haven't received any funds for those recently, but that will be something that staff will be at least taking a look at, see if there are some projects that make sense. No guarantee that they will, but it is something that we'll be looking at. So moving on to potential projects. So these are three projects that are currently being considered, at least at the staff level, for STBG. One on the left side is an extension of Woodland Road. We applied for this project back in 2024, and it didn't score high enough to be funded at that time. So if we were going to pursue this, we'd have to take a good look at the application and see if there were some things we could improve upon to maybe get some additional points. But this is another project that would, basically build out an arterial road that right now is kind of a little bit more of a goat path. And this would be from 71st Street down to the South City limits. And we could extend this project all the way up to Shawnee Mission Parkway if we wanted to add some better pedestrian facilities or bike lanes or something like that as well. So that's something that's being considered at the staff level. Another one that the governing body had shown interest in the past is Clare Road, which is what you see here in the middle. If you're familiar with the entirety of Clare Road, it can be a very narrow roadway, especially south of 63rd Street. There's a section that's probably about 1 lane wide. It can be a little harrowing. So this is another item or another project that we're considering as well and for this application. And then finally, we also have the 435 and Johnson Drive interchange. This is another one that we applied for 2 years ago and was really close to the funding line. And so, this could be one that maybe if we tweak our application a little bit and sharpen our pencil a little bit, maybe we can bump this one up higher. But this is another one that at least has been considered in the past. In terms of TA, CMAQ, and CRP, so for transportation alternatives, Public Works is currently going to be working with the Parks and Rec Department and using our bicycle routes and shared use kind of future plan to see if there are any routes that kind of make sense to potentially apply for this go around. And really what we're trying to do too is build out a plan. So when these funding opportunities come up, we're kind of ready to go with the next one in the hopper. So we're kind of working on that right now. And we'll probably have more information on that next time we come back to discuss this. And then, as I mentioned, we're still going to look at the CMAQ and CRP projects, but we don't really have the guidance as to what they're going to be looking for in those yet. So we're not going to do a lot of work on that until we get that information from the Mid-America Regional Council. So in terms of the application schedule and next steps, so we talked, the whole idea tonight, was to just give you an idea of, what our options could be and get you start thinking about that. You can obviously provide more information or answer any questions that you may have. And we'll probably come back sometime in February to maybe hear if you have some ideas or things you want us to focus on. And then we can go back and, do some internal scoring on those and see how they may shake out. And then if we need to, we can certainly come back again, because our pre-application, basically kind of the first stage in the process, will be in April. So we still have plenty of time. We still have several months to kind of look through some different options. After we submit that pre-application, Mark's staff will do a review of everything that's been submitted and kind of a pre-scoring in April through June. And then we will kind of have our final technical application, which is really the second step of the process. Both steps are required, but our more detailed application will be in July. Mark will do some additional scoring internally, and there'll be some discussions basically through different committees to help determine what the priorities will be for the region. That selection will likely take place in October of this year, and then we'll go through several subsequent committees at Mid-America Regional Council for approval. And then we'll probably, basically by October, we should have a good idea of what projects, if any, were selected for funding. And then at that point, it just has to kind of go up several committees within Mark for approval, and we won't receive basically final approval until January. But in all likelihood, in October, we should have a really good idea of where we stand on these projects. So I know I threw a lot of information at you there, but that's all I had for tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Kevin. Are there any questions from council? Kurt?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Couple of things. First of all three of those potential STBG projects, I think, are spot on. Obviously, being in Ward 3, I'm especially interested in Clare Road. I think it's really unsafe. I know whenever I'm on it and another car comes, one of us just has to completely stop and move over as much as possible. And so I'm especially interested in that. I was wondering two things on it though. Number one, because I believe there's a development going in at like 71st Street. And I believe we had talked about this, where the developer will be required to upgrade a significant portion of it, in a section of it, and then we would complete it. Would that help us score better if we don't have to fund as much?
Yeah, so I think the developer is going to have to widen out the road to some degree, but I don't think it's necessarily to like the ultimate configuration. And so this project, the intent would be this, whatever we build out there would be the ultimate roadway, where it would. So even if that developer came in and did some widening, it may not be the final, like I said, the final configuration. If for some reason we did receive funding and we knew about it before the developer did their work, we'd probably work with them to help them contribute towards the project. It doesn't make sense for them to go in and make improvements and us to tear those out a few years later. Another section on the Clare Road piece is we'd have to think about probably breaking that up into different sections, because if we looked at basically from like the southern part of the city all the way up to like north of 55th Street, that's a huge project. And so it's unlikely we'd be able to tackle that all at once. And we'd have to do a little bit more research in terms of what we wanted to do first. But a likely scenario could be that one very narrow section south of 65th
Yeah, that
Street.
one very narrow section would obviously be first. And it's going uphill and everything else.
Yep.
The other question I had, it's been like 3 years since I've heard us talk about it. But at one point I think it might have been Lauren gave us a really large presentation on the idea of green streets, especially as we talk about Clare and Mize and some of those. They're going to be lower cost. I think they usually have a trail or maybe a sidewalk, but I think it was more of a trail on it. And I think they're eco-friendly. I forget. Have we sort of abandoned that philosophy, or was that a concept we would look at as we look at some of these streets out west? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. So I think the intent of the staff level of that previously is that we wanted to kind of maybe have more of an intermediate option for developers, where like the full cost was maybe too much to put up completely on the developers, and the city wasn't necessarily a priority to improve that roadway immediately. I think what we found is, we're not getting a lot of traction with that right now, and development has just some of the streets have just slowed down. So we haven't really had as many opportunities to implement that. But for instance, for this particular program, we're not really, I still view that as like an intermediate option. We would ideally like to bring our streets up to, I guess, our modern standards. that the Green Street was always intended to be kind of intermediate, and we can still, if someone was interested, we would still entertain it, but it's not something that we kind of want to do as an ultimate configuration, ideally.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just wondering if it might help us score better and better chance of getting approved if it costs less. Thanks.
Steele?
Thanks, Kevin. On the TA and the CMAC and the CRP, like potential projects, do you think there'd be an opportunity there to kind of look at a commuter-focused east-west bike lane or bike route? Looking at that map, and then just from hearing from residents, there isn't really obviously a great way to kind of bike across Shawnee like that. And with the bike lane going in Midland, and then also the at least my current understanding of what the Rail Creek park is going to kind of look like with its emphasis on biking. It'd be a really nice addition if we could start to work towards kind of connecting, particularly the east side of Shawnee, to that bike focused park, and just continue to kind of push a bike friendly agenda. That'd be something, if there was an opportunity, some route that could be kind of looked into, that would be really interesting to me.
Yes, we can definitely do that.
Awesome.
Eric?
Thank you, Kevin. Could you pull up the screen showing the potential extension of Turkey Creek?
Yeah.
So familiar with Turkey Creek, and then when it comes out, you said onto Neiman, where would that connect to?
So there's an existing trail. You can see where the blue line ends on the west side. There's basically a sidewalk across that channel there, and there's already an existing sidewalk that connects to Neiman through there. So it's not even going up the channel. It's basically perpendicular across the channel. I know it's hard to see on this aerial, but there's already an existing sidewalk connection there.
I gotcha. Okay, yeah, because I've been very interested in seeing some type of connection to Turkey Creek, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I was looking before at potentially 55th Street, because there's a park on 55th and Neiman where people could park and then run from there, bike from there to Turkey Creek. But yeah, I was just curious where that came out to on Neiman. So thank you.
Any other questions? Sarah?
Yeah, so on those potential projects, I mean, Woodland, Claire, those feel much more personal. I, drive around there a bit more, but I was wondering, the interchange, what exactly would be done there? Is this an infrastructure improvement? Is this changing the actual structure? What would be the project?
Yeah, our previous application was actually to signalize those ramp terminals. It's also been contemplated to, the ramps are in a little bit of a substandard design, and that they're not coming in at a 90-degree angle. Whether or not we want to pursue that, that's kind of in my view, kind of a minor benefit and potentially a more major cost. But at a minimum, for years, we've heard complaints and concerns about, especially the southbound 435 ramp terminal, some of the site distance. We're certainly hoping in the future too, we're going to see more development out there. And I've always described this as a location where I think people are aware that, when you're coming off the ramp, you need to look both ways and accelerate. You don't want to be casually going through that intersection. And so, we've taken a look at crash history out there on a regular basis, and there's not a lot. I think people expect that there's more. We hear the term near miss a lot. But my expectation, if we do see more development out there and there's, even a reasonable amount of additional traffic, we're going to start seeing more issues out there, because feel like we're kind of getting closer to the edge. We're still okay right now. But if we did see any kind of large development on the southwest corner or southeast corner and a lot more traffic going through that area, I think we'd start to see a lot more issues with that interchange. And so obviously right now we're talking about 2930 funding. So, it takes some time to get out in front of it.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Did anyone sign up? Is there anyone in the audience who wants to come up? All right. Does anyone on the council have any comments? Sorry, Paul.
I would just offer from the staff's perspective, if you would like to schedule any time to come in and talk with us more about this, Kevin or myself, just that door is always open as we work through this. So please feel free to not wait till February. If you have questions, send them our way, and we'll address those and get those answers to the entire group. if you have, because a lot of times you have good questions and we can share as much information as possible. Go ahead. Thank you.
All right, and I was just going to say thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to explain all of this to us. There's a lot of acronyms, and I appreciate your patience with going through all of this multiple times with us until we get it. All right, this item is for informational purposes only. So that concludes our agenda. I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Jeannie?
Move to adjourn.
Second. Sarah?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. All
Aye.
those nay, opposed nay. Okay, we're gone.